On Monday, September 20th, 2004, a group of 5 Forest Service researchers flew out of Kalispell International Airport, heading into the Bob Marshall Wilderness near Glacier National Park. Among the crew was a contract pilot, Jim Long, 60, of Kalispell, rainforest employee Ken Good, 58, of Whitefish, and 3 researchers from the Forest Service Rocky Mountain Research Station, Davita Bryant, 32, of Whitefish, Montana, Matthew Ramige, 29, of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and Jodee Hogg, 23, of Billings, Montana. They were being ferried to a remote location to conduct an annual vegetation inventory and repair some telecommunication stations. It was already a dangerous flight, made only worse by the terrible conditions that they were flying in. The pilot, Jim Long, got turned around mid-flight heading into a box canyon. A box canyon is a narrow formation of mountains and ridge lines with only one way in and one way out. With the low visibility and the clear mistake being made, Jim Long made a maneuver to try to get them back on track, and unfortunately he turned directly into the ridgeline. The tiny plane that they were flying in struck Mount Liebig at about 6,500 feet of elevation, right above the ridgeline. Their flight, not even 20 minutes after takeoff, had ended in disaster. Before diving into this epic story of tragedy and survival, I wanted to say that I've actually never been this excited to share a story with you. Usually when I discover a new topic that I want to talk about and share with you on Montana After Midnight, I run into one of 2 situations. Take Night of the Grizzlies, for example. It was one of my biggest videos. It's a hugely popular topic that's been well covered by many a creator. There's tons of information, tons of sources. And then there's topics that are a little bit more obscure. These are things where the only source that I can find is one chapter out of a book that I owned on Montana history. Think of things like my video on Spider McCullen, a boxer in Montana who was tragically killed in his own home. There's only one source for that, and I decided to make a video about his life and subsequent murder. But this story is different from either of those situations. There are tons of news articles from the time written about this plane crash. There's even a college report written about this situation, and even Good Morning America interviews that I wasn't able to actually find only transcripts of. And yet there's virtually zero coverage on YouTube or like any podcast that have talked about this Great Bear Wilderness plane crash. So I kind of get to be the first person to make a YouTube/podcast episode about this crazy story of survival. So I'm super excited to be the one that gets to share this. For a story this unbelievably interesting and deep, I can't believe that more people haven't talked about it. As always, make sure to subscribe, like, and leave a comment if you've enjoyed listening to this story. And if you want to go above and beyond, you can become a member for the channel, which just directly supports me, or you can look into buying some of my awesome merch. But all that being said, thank you for being here with me. Let's jump into this epic story of survival. The impact of the crash itself was backbreaking. The nose of the plane folded in on itself and it left the crew in different stages of injury. Before anyone could even react, flames erupted from the wreckage with a powerful flash of heat. From what we can tell, 4 out of 5 of the crew members survived the initial impact. It was Jodee Hogg who jumped into action first, unbuckling her seatbelt, throwing her door open, and landing on the mountain snow below. She immediately noticed that Matt Ramige and his foot were trapped in the now contorted plane wreckage. Luckily, with Hogg's help, Ramige was able to be ripped free, alive, but in drastically worse condition than Hogg. As the flame rose up, Long, the pilot, sized up the situation, unbuckled Ken Good, who was injured and next to him, and shoved him out of the plane. While that was happening, Hogg looked back at the wreckage for her friend Davita Bryant, who was bloodied and unmoving. Given this, it's believed that Davita was the only crew member of the 5 that actually died on impact, and she was only 32 at the time. Jim Long, despite being able to save Ken Good from the chaos, never made it out of the plane himself. He was the second crew member to pass away as the flames from the wreckage rose up around him. In just a few terrifying moments, their small crew of 5 was dwindled down to a mere 3. The 3 survivors, beaten, bruised, and with clothes half burnt off, threw together a quick shelter from the scattered plane debris, and then held close together as they needed each other's warmth just to survive. In the immediate aftermath, Hogg seemed to be doing the best, followed by Ramige, and then there was Good, who seemed to be in dire states after the crash. Ramige had his shirt burned off in the crash, so he laid in the middle between the two other survivors, creating somewhat of a sandwich. This is literally what every article said, that they made a Ramige sandwich. The three talked and prayed for rescue all night as they battled the cold mountain elements. Despite all their prayers, their makeshift shelter, constructed of part of the engine, the doors, a windshield, and part of the aircraft's tail, did not last throughout the night and completely blew apart due to the strong mountain winds. Tragically, due to the failing shelter and his traumatic injuries, Ken Good would barely make it to the next day, passing away around 8 a.m. in the morning, making him the third fatality of the plane crash. Shortly after Good's passing, the two remaining survivors made the bold decision to hike down the mountain through the Tunnel Creek drainage towards a highway that they had spotted. They had spotted this highway before their visibility completely disappeared, and their small plane was completely swallowed by the Box Canyon. They chose action instead of waiting for a rescue that wasn't guaranteed of showing up. Before leaving, Ramige donned his now-deceased crewmate's flight jacket in preparation for the harsh elements. Without taking Good's flight jacket, he probably would have succumbed to the elements, and his survival would have been much less likely. Long into their hike, Ramige, battling his injuries with every step, found it harder and harder to keep going. The pair would pass by streams where they could finally get some much-needed drinking water, but Ramige had a fractured back that he could not bend. So every time he wanted to drink, he would have to lie on his stomach and push his face directly into the water. The pain was so great that if Hogg wasn't there beside him, supporting him, Ramige might have simply chosen to never rise up again. As they moved further from the crash site, they hoped that if a rescue team ever did discover the plane, they would find their footprints in the fresh snow, creating a trail to follow. This was a hope that only grew as the injured pair saw and heard other aircrafts flying overhead, heading straight towards the crash site. Unbeknownst to them, the snow had melted long before search and rescue ever found the wreckage, wiping away all signs of their escape, and now it was completely up to investigators to determine what exactly happened at the crash site. This is where things get a little controversial. The morning after the crash, the search and rescue team from Flathead County Sheriff's Office and the U.S. Forest Service and other local agencies located the wreckage of the missing plane high on the slopes of Mount Liebig in Montana's remote Great Bear Wilderness. When investigators reached the site, they found what appeared to confirm the worst. The aircraft had slammed into the mountainside with such tremendous force. According to the Flathead County Sheriff Jim DuPont, the single-engine plane went from 100 to 0 miles per hour in about 40 to 50 feet. A plane crash fire had swept through the wreckage, destroying most of the aircraft. DuPont later said that the fire had melted everything. Rescuers spent more than an hour examining the scene. Human remains, of course, were found among the wreckage, and investigators searched for any indication that someone might have survived and left the area. Unfortunately, they found no footprints, no notes, no evidence that anyone had walked away alive. We know now that when the plane crashed, the mountains were covered in snow, and the snow holding our survivors' footprints had melted away. Based on the severity of the impact and the extensive fire damage and the evidence around the scene, authorities concluded that all 5 people aboard the small plane had perished. One of the victims' remains, most likely Ken Good, was airlifted off the mountain. All of the families, including Hogg's and Ramige's, were notified that their loved ones had died. As investigators continued to process the scene, the case appeared to be tragic but a straightforward fatal crash. In the hours that followed, some friends, family members, and local volunteers questioned whether if anyone had survived, and they wanted to organize a search group in the surrounding wilderness. As many as 100 volunteers in Whitefish were reportedly ready to help. However, because investigators observed the human remains and the extensive fire damage and saw no evidence of any type of escape and survival, Sheriff Jim DuPont and other investigators declared that no authorized additional search effort should go out, as there was clearly no survivors, a fact we now know to be horrifyingly untrue. This means that the volunteer search efforts were never allowed to get going, a decision that seemed reasonable at the time given the evidence available, but it would take on a very different meaning knowing that just miles down the mountain, Hogg and Ramige were still fighting for their survival, injured and close to death. After a grueling 29 hours hiking down 2,500 feet of elevation from where their crewmates had passed away, Ramige and Hogg heard their first real sign of hope. This was a Amtrak train in the distance, and not long after that, the pair finally reached US Highway 2. They flagged down a passing car, which then raced to the nearest home and made the phone call that they had been fighting for this whole time. They were both rushed to hospitals. Hogg was taken to Kalispell, covered in bruises and burns, and was reported to have a sprained ankle, making her descent down the mountain even that more incredible. Ramige was transported all the way down to Harborview Medical Center in Seattle, where doctors treated his fractured back and his severe burns on his chest and hands, which required skin grafts. He actually turned 30 years old during his stay and was reported to be in good spirits despite his tragic situation. He was set to be released in mid-October. The discovery of Hogg and Ramsey sent shockwaves throughout all of Montana. Just one day earlier, authorities had declared that all 5 passengers had died, and the families had already begun their grieving processes. Ramige's family had even started making funeral arrangements, while Hogg's family had accepted the tragic news. Investigators were absolutely stunned. The crash scene had appeared to be unsurvivable. The undersheriff, Chuck Curry, who helped make the determination and personally delivered the death notifications, later apologized, saying to the families, "If you want to be mad at someone, I'm your guy. I'm so sorry. I'm so happy they're alive, and I'm so sorry we weren't out there looking." For many, the story transformed from an overnight fatal plane crash to what Sheriff Jim DuPont would describe as an incredible miracle. Linda Woods, a friend of Ramige, was a part of the group that tried to set out a search party after the wreckage was found, but their offer was declined after authorities were convinced that no one could have survived. Linda would go on to say, "Last night we sat on the couch and cried instead of being out hiking and searching, and we just accepted what we were told." Obviously, this struck up a whole bunch of controversy, mainly with the sheriffs not allowing for any search parties without recovering all the bodies. Now, it is insanely tragic that the snow that would have led people to the survivors melted away before the rescue team and investigators even got to the scene. It's also insanely tragic that our pair of survivors, Hogg and Ramige, decided to take their lives into their own hands and hike down the mountain when rescue was literally right behind them, and if they had just stayed put, they probably would have been rescued immediately. Jim Long, 60 of Kalispell, Ken Good, 58 of Whitefish, and Evita Bryant, 32, also of Whitefish. All 3 of these people tragically lost their lives way too soon, leaving behind people that love and miss them dearly. And yet, what can only be described as a miracle, Matthew Ramige with a fractured back and Jodee Hogg with a sprained ankle crawled out of the wreckage and stumbled for more than 10 miles to safety, broken and burned, with nothing but each other and the will to keep moving. I was drawn to this story because the tragedy that was involved in every single step of it, not just the brutal crash or the death of Ken Good on the second day, but literally everything that came after that. It's easy after the fact to say that they should have just stayed with the wreckage waiting for help. It's also easy to point the finger at the officers who declared that the site was unsurvivable and called off any search operation. But I don't think that's necessarily the real lesson here. To me, this story is about hope and what happens when hope runs out. Hogg and Ramige held on to it when they had every reason not to. It carried them across 10 miles down a mountain with a broken spine and burned hands. The investigators clearly didn't have any hope from the beginning, just looking at the crash site. And that led to the 2 remaining survivors to spend the next 48 hours alone in the wilderness because of it. It was hope that kept Jodee and Matthew alive, and it was the absence of hope in the investigators that almost let these 2 survivors die. Today, nearly 20 years later, from what I can tell, Jodee Hogg and Matthew Ramige have made fairly strong recoveries. It was a pleasure diving into this story, as like I said, I haven't really seen a lot of people cover it. One thing that really sticks with me is the imagery of flying through the mountains, slowly losing visibility as it gets worse, and then realizing that the pilot had made a mistake and you aren't where you think that you are, and you're just surrounded by these white storm clouds. Like, the visibility was so low. I've been in like a commercial plane where we've lost visibility, and I was like, oh, this is a little weird. I can only imagine what it's like flying through the mountains, losing visibility, and then as soon as you see the pilot start to turn, you collide with the side of a mountain. And then boom, white flash, everything is on fire, and all you can do is unbuckle yourself and fall outside of the plane. Another thing that I have to mention is the plane wasn't like dangling. It crashed into the side of a ridge, and then it was just kind of stationary, it seemed like to me. So it wasn't like they were dangling from a tall tree or anything like that. They were just on the side of a mountain, and they were able to crawl out of the wreckage. At least the lucky few that were able to get out of the burning plane. We know now, obviously, that DeVita died on impact and was stuck inside the plane, and that Jim Long, after saving Ken Good, either succumbed to his injuries or the fire erupted around him, unfortunately causing him to pass away. But just the imagery of the initial crash and the build-up to before the crash is what's really going to stick with me about this story. But now I turn it over to you. What do you think about this crazy tale of survival? Are you mad that the plane even took off on a risky flight during bad conditions? Mad at the pilot for driving into a box canyon? Are you furious at the investigators for calling off any search efforts? Do you understand where everyone is coming from and just happy that anyone survived this crazy plane crash at all? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for being here with me on Montana After Midnight as I covered one of the most interesting and devastating stories to date on this channel. If you want more videos like this, like and subscribe. I'm telling you, it's super important. And then you'll see my other videos. I have a backlog of probably like 25 other videos just like this for you to watch right now if you're interested. And if you want to go above and beyond with your support, you can always buy my merch, which is linked below, or check out memberships, which is a monthly paid extra subscription that gets you a couple benefits, and it really helps the channel grow. All that being said, thank you so much for being here with me. Have a fantastic day.